This is the Analysing Anfield podcast on the Blood Red channel, bringing you the best tactical and statistical analysis of Liverpool FC.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams and I'm joined as always by David Hughes. Dave, getting the sun in?
Hopefully, mate, yeah. It's very nice out there, isn't it? So it's a shame we couldn't take it outside. But, you know, happy to sit in for an hour or so and talk football on today's show, and then I'll enjoy some sun later, I think.
It could be a new concept, that podcast in the park or something like that.
Well, you know, everything's open up again, isn't it? So maybe we can get that one signed off rather than going back to the studio.
Yeah, that's it. But we've came in because there's reasons to come in. Liverpool have got a busy week upcoming, and there's obviously a bit of breaking news that we're going to have to address. Well, ish. So this week we're going to talk about, obviously, Ibrahima Konate has been strongly linked with Liverpool. So we're going to talk about that one first up. Then we're going to look ahead to the weekend's game with Arsenal. And we're also going to preview the Champions League bout with Real Madrid. So quite a big episode, Dave. Quite a fair amount to talk about. But we will start with the news that's the only news, really, I suppose, that's emerged throughout the international break. And that is Ibrahima Konate is supposedly, I'm not sure exactly what the words were, on the verge, or Liverpool willing to pay his buyout clause and stuff like that. But are you in any way surprised? What are your thoughts on the player?
Well, I am surprised at how it come about. You know, the international break isn't normally where you'd see these kind of announcements, or, you know, although Liverpool haven't made an announcement at the end, they've tried to play down the rumours saying that he's just one of 5 players that they're looking at in that central defence area. I think it's pretty clear that it's probably a little bit more advanced than that. But you don't normally hear this information, do you? In the March international break. So yeah, quite surprised that come out. But, you know, from a Liverpool perspective, you know, there's plenty of reasons to be excited. I think if you think of the best young centre backs around in Wales football at the moment, you know, like De Ligt, Upamecano, Kunde, Botman, you know, those kind of players, I think he's right in there, isn't he? He's in that group. So to be bringing in a player like that, especially in a key area that you really want to strengthen in the summer, then, you know, it's only good news. So, you know, there might be one or two little concerns that we might come on to, but just in terms of the player himself, it looks to be a good move on paper, at least.
Yeah, I mean, we've flagged a few players over the course of the past few months who we think might be linked and stuff like that. And I must admit, Konate is one that we've looked past. The reason we've looked past him is because he's barely played. So I just didn't think that was the reason I was surprised. The thing that most surprised me was just, you know, given Liverpool's really thorough recruitment process and trying to really minimise any risk attached to any signing. You know, investing 30-40 million into a player who, since the beginning of last season, has started only 10 league games. I was quite surprised by that. And that's the primary reason, I think, why we've overlooked him on this pod, because he hasn't really shown up. And despite not showing up, I've still been aware of him, but I've thought, you know, because he's not really actively playing, it just feels that bit more unlikely that Liverpool are going to target this player. But we obviously seem to be. I mean, I think this is probably one of the reasons why Liverpool was so keen to avoid buying a centre back in January, because you've obviously got the 2 Leipzig lads, Konate and Upamecano. I think they were Liverpool's first and second choice for the centre back role this summer. Obviously, Upamecano signed for Bayern, but you were not going to get either of those 2 in the January window. Hence why we're moving now for Konate in the summer. But yeah, I think I was most surprised by the fact he's been injured, Dave. I'm sure you've read about it. It's probably been the main, let's say, weakness, maybe criticism attached to any potential deal, because he's missed a fair few matches.
Yeah, and when I referenced the red flags, that was the main one. I think this season maybe he's played just over 500 minutes. I did have a brief look at his injury history. Ankle injury from December to February, hip injury from June last year to October, leg injury that kept him out from October 19 to May 20. I think there was some sort of Twitter thread that a lot of listeners or viewers might have seen where someone tried to almost caveat these injuries. I'll be honest, I didn't bother reading it. Nothing against the person, I just skipped past it. So there may be, reasons behind these injuries, and it may be a case that they're not as bad as it seems. But yeah, when you talk about the risk that you mentioned, from that perspective, there does seem to be a little bit of a gamble there. I don't know, maybe the heads at Liverpool have got together and said, looked at these injuries and thought that they were kind of isolated and they weren't going to be recurring issues, and as a result, the prospects are good long term for him to be a reliable centre back, and that might be the case. They've got better resources than what we have, but you've already touched on. I think that's one of the main reasons that we didn't talk about him, because although the sample size is small, his underlying numbers are good. Like, he looks really good in the air. He's dominant on the floor. He's good in possession and things. But that is one of the reasons why he wasn't really someone that we went into too much detail with, because on the surface, at least, you probably think Liverpool might not gamble on him in the way that it looks like they're going to.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it would have come into it a little bit more if it was a different position. But I think, given the problems Liverpool have encountered specifically this year, I'm quite surprised that when searching for this new centre-back, time on the pitch hasn't been weighted really highly in the decision-making process. I thought it would be, simply because of what's happened this season to the likes of Gomez and Matip. I know Van Dijk's never injured, so that's a bit of a different one, that one. But I think specifically Gomez and Matip, I just thought Liverpool would target a player who is never injured, really. And I do think a few important points have been made, though, regarding Konate. I do think there's a difference. I'm glad some people pointed it out. I do think there's a difference between a player getting bad injuries and a player being injury prone. I think Joel Matip's very clearly injury prone, for example. He just picks up knocks, has to miss games as a result. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small. It's quite weird almost. Daniel Sturridge was the same. They're the two players off the top of my head. I think Daniel Agger was a little bit in that mould. I think on the different side, I don't think players who get big injuries are injury prone. Like, I'm thinking maybe, I don't know if this is entirely fair, but maybe an Ox. I mean, Ox doesn't pick up that many injuries, does he? He just gets big, massive ones that keep him out for months on end. And I'm not sure what Konate is at the moment. Obviously, he's only 21. And I think Liverpool are betting on it just being a bit of an unlucky problematic period, rather than it being an indicator of future injuries that are going to prevent him from being on the pitch. But, aside from the injuries, obviously we have to look why Liverpool have bought him. And the main reason Liverpool have bought him is because he has, in my opinion, an incredibly high ceiling. I think, given he's 21, I'm thinking by the age of 26, he could be a real centre-back in Europe.
Yeah, his ceiling is really high. I said it's hard because you're trying to use numbers to compare them. I mean, it's quite hard using data to compare defenders in normal circumstances, but this is a little bit harder because you're kind of comparing them to players who've played 3 or 4 times more minutes. Over say the last 12 months. But I did see over the last 12 months he's got something like the second highest aerial dual success rate for all central defenders across Europe's big 5 leagues, age 24 and under. So that's an indicator of just one of the things that's so appealing about him. And yeah, I think he can go on to be a really big player. It's just providing that these are kind of one-off injuries, not recurring issues. It does make me think, though, Josh. I wonder if maybe I don't want to do him a disservice, but maybe he might not have been the first choice. I wonder if maybe like with Meccano, obviously who is going to Bayern, I wonder if maybe he could have, another Leipzig defender, more of a known quantity, you probably say, because he's played a lot more minutes. I wonder if maybe he could have been the first choice. Obviously, he's opted to stay in Germany, and maybe Liverpool worked their way down the list a little bit and identified him as the next best target.
I think he might have been second. I think the only player above him will have been Upamecano, I think. But I think that offers a bit of a segue into comparing these players, maybe. Because when I tweeted yesterday about the whole Liverpool Red Bull link, I think I got three comments to the tweet just asking me, how did he compare to Botman? How did he compare to Kaleta and these players and stuff? And it was kind of difficult to capture that in a tweet, but I do think, each player's got different strengths and weaknesses. Like, for example, I think Konate is really good in the air. Obviously, you've touched on that one. I'll get his numbers up in a sec. He's also really good 1v1, which I think is very important for a Liverpool defender. Obviously, we've seen this season, without Van Dijk, when you've got players with centre-backs in particular who are really good 1v1, you can just commit more bodies forward. So if you're an attacking team, if you've got attacking running through your veins, then you need centre-backs who can cope on their own, who can manage, say, for example, a Nicolas Pepe on his own, or a Wilfried Zaha on his own, like Van Dijk can. So that's a really, really important trait for Liverpool centre-back to have, and I think Konate certainly has that. He's got all the dominant traits that you kind of need on your side as a centre-back, in terms of, he's really physically imposing, around 6'4". He's also quite quick across the ground. His acceleration isn't the quickest, but that's not always the case anyway with centre-backs. But his top speed, I think, is good. It's not far from, the likes of Van Dijk and Gomez, so I can't see him encountering many issues from a high-line perspective. But I think specifically in relation to Upamecano and Botman as well, I think he's maybe a bit less comfortable or less good on the ball, less progressive on the ball, maybe, let's say. I think he's a tiny bit more awkward, a little bit more inclined to play simple. And that's not a bad thing. You're next to Van Dijk, who's got that in his armoury, and you're next to Trent as well, I suppose, who's also got that in his armoury. So it's not that big of a problem. But I think it's interesting that of the players that Liverpool have been linked with, of the centre-backs we've mentioned and stuff, Konate is probably outside the top three for his actual ability on the ball, in my opinion. But he makes up for that on the defensive side, which Liverpool have clearly weighted a little bit more.
When you just on the possession thing, do you mean in terms of his actual ability, or more like his decisions, or the way in which he can, like, ping balls into the final third, for example?
No, I think his decisions are fine. I think he's quite a decent decision maker, but I think he's just more inclined to.
Would you say he's limited?
I think he plays like he is, but I'm not sure. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't say he's bad on the ball by any means, or lacks confidence or anything. But I think, those line breaking passes that centre backs play every now and then. Sven Botman plays a lot of them. Upamecano plays a fair amount. Konate doesn't. I'll get up the numbers now, just as you speak, just to prove me point. But yeah, I think it's on a,
all I was going to say was, I was just curious whether you thought of maybe it was like a lack of technical ability to do that, or maybe just decisions to do that, because I agree, he seems to play a lot more passes shorter, 5 or 10 yards sideways, maybe into the likes of Meccano, who then have that responsibility to be a little bit more penetrative. But I'm just wondering, maybe that could be more of a tactics thing. If there's someone who's just better in the defence to do it, then there's not really that responsibility on him to do it. But that'd be the same at Liverpool, really, wouldn't he? Say if you were playing with like a Van Dijk, you don't really need. Well, you've already touched on it, actually. You don't really need that response. You don't need to take on that responsibility when you've got two fantastic ball players either side in the defence. So as long as you can just be relied upon to be consistent in possession, with the short passes, don't do anything sloppy, don't make any mistakes. Kind of like, I don't want to sound like I'm doing them a disservice, but sometimes I felt like there was an uneasiness when Lovren was in possession in the defence, and there was a mistake that could be there, which is not good, even if you're flanked by the likes of Alexander-Arnold and Van Dijk. And I think if you've got a player you can just rely on to do the basics really well, then in itself that's an appealing facet to have.
Yeah. So just to prove my point, I've got up a little sample here, a little comparison of Upamecano, Botman, Van Dijk, Gomez, Matip, and Konate. And this is dating back from now until 2018 in league matches only, with the exception of Botman. With Botman's numbers, I've used only this season because this is the first season he's had in a European top 5 league. So we don't really have the numbers sometimes for, the Dutch Eredivisie and things like that. So his numbers might be a tiny bit flawed because he's played fewer. Mind you, he hasn't really, looking at the minutes there, he's played not far off Matip. He's played about 4 full games fewer than Matip in that time. So it's not that unfair. So in terms of progressive passes per 90, so a progressive pass is just a completed pass that moves the ball towards the opponent's goal at least 10 yards from its furthest point in the last 6 passes. Konate ranks bottom of that. Upamecano top, followed by Botman, then Van Dijk, then Gomez, and then Matip. Having said that, obviously we know Matip is really good on the ball. So Matip ranks second bottom there for that one. Matip's more of a carrier. And in terms of carries, let's have a look at this one, see what this one's showing up. So in terms of progressive carries, yeah, he's bottom again. So again, but Matip is top for that one, for carries. So we obviously know Matip's inclined to just go on these big mazy runs. So I think what I'm kind of getting at is, I think in possession specifically, Konate is just a bit safer, just a bit less elaborate. And I think his main perks come in defence, which is quite traditional, I suppose, for a centre-back. And he should naturally allow Liverpool to just get more bodies forward and attack more because of his 1v1 ability and his aerial duels. Looking at his aerial duels, actually, I'll compare the same players in the aerial department. Van Dijk top, no surprise. In that period, despite contesting the most aerial duels out of all the players I've just mentioned, Van Dijk has won 80.3% of those. And then pretty much joint second is Matip and Konate. So since 2018, Konate's been about as good in the air as Matip has. And Matip's incredibly good in the air, in my opinion. Dave.
Yeah, he is good, yeah.
For a bit of perspective on that, Joe Gomez is bottom with a success rate of about 59.9%. Then Botman, then Upamecano. So as I said, Konate 77.4% win rate. Only about 3% off Van Dijk's average. So that's certainly a big strength of his. And it's one that we're obviously going to be able to use not only in defence but attacking set pieces, which Liverpool have lacked a little bit this season, Dave.
Yeah, it's for any central defender, it's important to be good in the air. But I do feel like at Liverpool, especially, it's really key, because of that notorious high line that gets played. You need to be aerial dominant against opposition attackers, especially if they only out balls to try and go long. You've got to have the obviously pace to cover in behind, but also win that initial header when possible. Gomez always hasn't been the best at that, shall we say. So if you can introduce someone who's as good as Matip's always been good in that role, and Matip is a really good defender. He's a great partner for Van Dijk. He just he unfortunately can't stay fit and probably never will be someone who doesn't break down often. But if you can kind of inject someone with a similar ability, especially in the air, who's obviously got a really high ceiling, miles off his prime years at the moment, then it's easy to see why the appeal's there. And as I said, aerial dominance is really big for Liverpool central defenders, and for him to be showing up well, that's almost guaranteed to be one of the key reasons why Liverpool like him.
Yeah. As I said, he ticked the majority of the boxes. I've went over those boxes plenty of times in this podcast, considering Liverpool have needed a centre-back for quite a while now. But, most of them he ticks. Again, he's only 21 years old, 6'4", quick across the ground, good in the air, offer a threat from set pieces, can defend 1v1. And I will say as well, in comparison to Sven Botman, who I put forward, I think, in November as a name, one thing he didn't have on his side was his 1v1 stuff. Not bad, but a little bit less mobile. When you've got a player who's good at changing direction quickly.
Yeah.
I think if you change direction quickly in Botman's vicinity, it's kind of like moving a Coke machine. It's like moving a fridge when he's trying to turn, which isn't great, obviously, when you're coming into the Premier League. Konate, I think, copes a little bit better than that department.
I have to admit, quickly, I watched a little bit of Botman on international duty a few days ago, and it wasn't the best performance.
Yeah, I mean, he's still how old is he? 20, 21?
Something like that, or 20, 21, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the positive. All of these players are still very young, but I think
specifically just 10, 21.
Yeah, I think specifically in terms of Konate, he just looks ahead of his age, really. You would probably guess he's about 25, but he's obviously not. And I think the thing with that as well, despite Konate being 21 and Liverpool signing him technically for the future, crucially, he's also good enough to contribute immediately and not look like he's completely out of place. Say, for example, certain players you sign before they reach the peak and they're just not ready, and they've got plenty of learning curves to experience, plenty of mistakes to make before they reach that level. Say, for example, Mo Salah, when Salah came to Chelsea, he weren't really ready to move Willian out the starting 11 or Hazard out the starting 11. He ends up going to Italy for a few seasons, comes back as a man. He actually used those words. He described himself as a man when he returned. And then Liverpool get the best out of him. So, I do usually think Liverpool should sign players in the peak. But I think at the same time, if you can get a player who's clearly ahead of his years while being good enough now, I think it's worth doing. Just another little note there on his passing range, his technical stuff. Switches. So a switch is a pass that travels more than 40 yards of the width of the pitch. Of the same centre-backs, we know who's top, Dave, don't we? It's obviously Van Dijk. Them diagonal passes are part of his armoury. Second is Gomez.
Big time.
Second is Gomez.
I didn't know Gomez would be that high, to be honest.
No, I didn't. He's second is Gomez. Third is Upamecano. Fourth is Matip. Fifth is Botman, and again, bottom is Konate. So, yeah, I think I'm just stressing. I'm not trying to say he's bad. I'm just stressing. Don't be expecting fireworks on the ball like we maybe get with Van Dijk. I think he's predominantly going to be a real defensive presence who's going to come into his own as opposed on the attacking side when Liverpool have a set piece. But yeah, I'm not sure there's any more to add on that one, Dave. I've seen Liverpool. Go on. I was going to say I've seen Liverpool linked with. I've seen a few people suggest that he's part of a shortlist still, and that shortlist consists of I think Ben White's on it, Kagla Soyuncu from Leicester is also on it, and Kaleta, obviously who we mentioned a while back and who Liverpool apparently tried to sign in January. In comparison to them, would you say Liverpool should go for Konate or?
Look, as I said, I think there's loads to like about Konate, and I can definitely see the appeal. We've just spoke for 20 minutes about it. The only slight concern I do have is the same as everyone else, just whether these injuries are going to be issues long term, or they're just it's just being really bad luck. But I guess, as I said, Liverpool definitely looked into that, and they've obviously got of the opinion that it has just been a little bit of bad luck. So on that basis, I mean, look, I'd say at least 3 of the names you've just mentioned there would be appealing from a Liverpool perspective. But I think they've done well here if they get this one over the line.
One thing I should mention as well, I was quite surprised. Might have just been my feed at the time, but I was quite surprised that when the Konate news came out, a lot of people seemed concerned about what now happens regarding Kabak. And although I think he's been better in recent weeks, I was a little bit harsh on him early on, I think. Although he's been better in recent weeks, I still would not really be bothered if Liverpool didn't keep him on a permanent basis. I don't know if I'm just more low on him than the majority of supporters, but he looks okay. But I think he's maybe a year younger than Konate. He might even be the same age now.
Age now, yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
So if you were on, I think, I thought he looked a little bit shaky initially. Although I was trying to picture whether he just performed at a fairly average level and was involved into kind of, he was involved in a high profile error, wasn't he, where him and Alisson had the cock up at Leicester. I've referenced this a few times. I know it wasn't much, but I thought he looked really shaky at the start of the derby where he put the ball out for a corner from the kickoff. And that might seem so harsh, but it's just always stayed in my mind. But I think since then he's really settled in, and he's opened the door for Klopp to do things like play Fabinho back in midfield. Ben Davies hasn't even had a look in, hasn't been able to get on the pitch, so that's a testament to how he's performed. But I am with you where I'm like, I haven't really been blown away. I mean, it seems like a lot of the Liverpool fan base has been talking more about Phillips than Kabak, performance-wise. So yeah, let's see. I mean, the thing is, it's only 18 million, isn't it, to sign him?
Yeah.
So it's not a lot of money for a player who's young, who again could have a really high ceiling. So if he performs really well from now until the end of the season, then maybe push the button on that one.
Yeah, I think on that one for me, I just think, and you can call me harsh and stuff, but I just think Liverpool can maybe do better. And I don't think there's anything wrong with thinking that, to be honest. I think I've said this plenty of times. Liverpool, top of the food chain, needs to be targeting the best players who are ready. And although I've just said Konate's roughly the same age at the minute as Kabak, maybe a few months older, I think the difference is Konate is at a point of his career, point of development, whereby he can perform regularly now without having to experience loads of learning curves. And I feel like in Kabak's camp, although I feel like he's definitely ahead of the majority of centre-backs his age, I feel like if Liverpool was to keep him, those mistakes and lessons that he'd have to learn would experience on Liverpool's behalf, and he'd maybe cost us a point here and there every now and then. And I think Liverpool can do better than that. I think Liverpool can aim for players who are just primed, players who are just ready.
You'd basically prefer, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but you'd probably prefer for the player like that to go and fine tune his game elsewhere, become that player that his potential ceiling indicates, and then sign him then, where he's like the finished article.
Exactly. People would argue then you're paying more money and stuff. Yes, we're paying more money, but all the points that we might have lost while he was learning, someone else has lost. He's cost someone else results, and now he's coming to Liverpool when he's ready. Like I've seen people mention it regarding Van Dijk. Why didn't Liverpool go and get Van Dijk when he was at Celtic? There will have been a reason why Liverpool didn't go and get Van Dijk when he was at Celtic, and they got him now, because he's now at the prime, at the peak of his career. All them lessons in the past have been learned. He's now ready to win every week without costing any points and stuff.
The thing with Van Dijk as well, like, people kind of say he's always been as good as he has, and people roll out like compilation clips where he's like, ahead in every, the ones, don't you, that are very favourable and stuff. Now, I think he has been a top defender for a while, but I remember the likes of I remember Everton looking at him when he was at Celtic and people not being convinced, and one or two other kind of like lower to mid-table Premier League sides being linked with him as well. Like say a Palace, West Ham, those type of clubs, and obviously he ends up going to Southampton, doesn't he? So yeah, I agree. I think he maybe just wasn't ready to come in after the impact he's had. Because now you can look back on that transfer and say, yeah, okay, it was expensive, but it was perfect, really. Besides the injury, which has nothing to do with the transfer, that transfer played out perfectly.
Yeah, that's it. I don't want to be too harsh. I think he's fine. I think he's okay in that. He's going to have a good career. He can reach a solid level. But I just think the level that Liverpool need right now, all the time, at a bare minimum, I think he might occasionally fall short of and cost Liverpool a few points. But I don't want to stay on that one too long anyway, because as I said, I don't really mind him too much. I just think Liverpool can maybe do a little bit better. Hence the capture of Konate, or the impending capture of Konate, let's say. But we'll move on anyway to the next fixture, Dave. Liverpool have got Arsenal. The team that our producer supports. So I'm sure he'll be listening. I'm sure he'll be keen to know what I've got to say. Dave, thoughts on Arsenal?
Terrible side, hate them, rubbish. No, you know what? I'd probably say an improving side. I mean, I haven't looked at the table in a long time, so they're ninth at the moment. But yeah, they're improving. They've lost one of the last six. I'm sure we'll get onto the underlying numbers shortly, but just in terms of results, lost one of the last six, and that came against Manchester City. It was only a 1-0 defeat. There's no shame in that, but some decent wins in that time. Beat Leeds, beat Leicester, beat Tottenham. I have to say, Josh, the last game before the international break against West Ham, I know they started really bad, 3-0 down after half an hour or whatever it was, but that last hour of the match, I thought Arsenal were really good, really strong, playing some good stuff. Odegaard was the best I've ever seen him play personally. Yeah, they just look like a team that's slowly improving under Arteta. So probably not a great opponent to have on paper next, even though you'd still back Liverpool.
It's interesting that you mentioned Odegaard there, actually, because he was one of the players who, I can't remember what the episode specifically was. I can't remember why we were flagging these random scouting targets, but I just remember mentioning Odegaard and saying, Liverpool were linked with him when he was 16. He still hasn't gone away. He's still very much there. And obviously, he came to Arsenal. He seems to be doing quite well at the minute. A few people have asked me, whether you'd take him at Liverpool and stuff. I'm not sure about that one. I don't think I would at the minute. Nevertheless, though, he's clearly performing very well. And he's very inclined to put his teammates in scoring positions, which is really, really valuable. But I think to avoid that from happening, Liverpool kind of need to keep him away from the final third if possible. Saw a few videos on Twitter from people that I follow, tactical heads who kind of picked up on how Odegaard, if he's receiving the ball in his own half and kind of building from the back, he's a little bit less inclined to make optimal decisions, really. He's more dangerous higher up the field and stuff. So I think he came into his own against West Ham later in the game, when obviously West Ham had just retreated into a block and were kind of holding the lead. But I think maybe in different match scenarios, he's not as effective, and I think Liverpool needs to avoid that sort of thing from happening and needs to kind of be on the front foot. But I think in terms of Arsenal, yeah, if you look at the numbers over the past few seasons, I don't think you'd notice too much of a difference at the minute. It looks kind of like not that much has changed. Across the board, they're still kind of just okay, and they're still kind of just a very mid-table side. If you look at the non-penalty expected goals per match, 8th, shots per match, 9th, and then on the defensive side, non-penalty expected goals against per match is 11th, and shots against is 10th. So they are very much in and around that. But nevertheless, I still think that just looking at the team and what Arteta's trying to do, I still think they look well coached. I do think that they're a product, though, Dave, of you're only as good as your players. For me, I think Arteta's players cost him results a lot of the time without him really doing anything wrong.
Yeah, well, you think of the more high-profile ones, mistakes, things like the Xhaka one, playing out from the back. I think Luiz is on the whole actually a really good defender, but he's normally capable of one or two mistakes. Normally, I think when you're trying to implement a philosophy like Arsenal's under Arteta, where it's all about getting the ball down, playing, being brave, I think it's fantastic when it comes off, but it carries a lot of risk, doesn't it? And you tend to be punished when it goes wrong in the Premier League, and that's happened a few times. One thing I would say on the underlying numbers is we can kind of isolate them to an extent, certainly with the underlying stuff, using like Understat, can't we? It's a little bit more difficult using other data providers to do that. But I think, pretty much since the turn of the year, they've been a better side. I think they're still kind of, in the underlying numbers, being punished a little bit by how poor they were, in the months before Christmas. I think they have improved a little bit since then.
Well, I'm not sure if you realised, but it seems to have like literally coincided with the formation change. As soon as the formation change happened, the results turned a little bit. Like they went faced Burnley, got beat 1-0. Faced Southampton, 1-1. Faced Everton, got beat 2-1. Faced Man City, got beat 4-1. And that was all with 3 at the back. In fact, the Burnley defeat actually wasn't. The Burnley defeat was different, but they were all with 3 at the back, really. And then he moved to 4-2-3-1 on Boxing Day. Beat Chelsea 3-1, then beat Brighton, then beat West Brom, then beat Newcastle. Drew with Palace, beat Newcastle again. So, and I think he's stuck with 4-2-3-1 since Boxing Day up until now. And it just seems to have turned things a little bit. And if we were able to separate the numbers purely since Boxing Day, I do think that shows some kind of development that where Arteta's starting to build something now. It's just the season as a whole, because half of it consisted of much of what came before, really. You don't really see it, and you probably won't see it until next season.
Yeah. Just as we were talking, then I just had a quick look at something really basic, under stats expected points table from 1st of January, and they're in the top 6 on that.
What would it be till since Christmas Day?
Since Christmas Day, top 4.
Yeah, see, that's since the formation change, so it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that I was of the opinion that they maybe went to that back 3 to offer a bit more protection to the centre backs, who I don't think he particularly rated. As a 2. Thought he'd do better with the 3, but yeah, as you've just highlighted well there, it feels like he's changed it, and it's a system that's working. So I said they're a different team now to what they were, and they just look a little bit more threatening in attacking areas as well. In that period where they were poor, these look so bad going forward. Feel like they weren't getting the best out of the more flair, creative players. Like Saka, who's proven himself to be really good. He was shackled a little bit. Now you've got like Saka performing well. You've got Smith Rowe. I think Lacazette's continuing to find the back of the net. I had a talk. Funny enough, I spoke to Guy, our producer, about Lacazette, and he has this perception of not really being much of a kind of goal scorer, and it's everything he does off the ball and how he links play. But his record's actually good in front of goal. He's like, every year he's been in the Premier League, he's netted more than 10 league goals across a campaign. And he is quite a consistent scorer. And again, he's kind of producing the goals, for Arsenal at this moment in time. He's on a good run, so he could be a problem. Yeah,
just touching on the whole back 3 thing. You mentioned there that it was for protection purposes and stuff. I also think that, one of the perceptions with a back 3 is that, obviously with Arteta likely to be an advocate of positional play in the Pep Guardiola mould, along with Thomas Tuchel as well. I think it's interesting that Tuchel, Guardiola when he first came to City really, and Arteta at Arsenal, they all kind of used back 3 at the very start of their tenures, and it was kind of because if you're adopting the principles of positional play, whereby each player takes up a different vertical zone sort of thing, and you haven't really got clogged areas and stuff like that, a back 5/3, whatever you want to call it, kind of just makes that the case regardless of players having to consciously think. You've already got a back five with those 5 players occupying a different vertical line, and it just kind of works from there. So I think a back 3 tends to be viewed as like a bit of an early shortcut to just get your players playing in a certain way regarding positional aspects and stuff like that. And then Arteta's obviously moved away, but one of the issues that did have on Arsenal early on, you mentioned there, the attack was very stale. They just weren't shooting enough and stuff. And I've got the table up here now, up until Christmas Day. So from the start of the season till Christmas Day, and Arsenal are ahead of only Sheffield United, Burnley, and West Brom for goals scored. They had only scored 12 by Christmas Day. A little bit higher for expected goals, about 15th, maybe 14th. But I think, just dropping that additional defender and dropping Willian as well seems to be a bit of a ploy. I've said before, Willian's a good player. Willian's got attacking qualities, but he's a bit like a Iwobi, in my opinion, Dave. I've said this before, haven't I? I think in terms of, you think he's an attacker, but if you actually put him in your attack in a final third position, he won't score or assist. He won't do it.
His output just isn't there.
Yeah, his output isn't there. Aside from set pieces, in Willian's case, he won't actually score or assist an open play very much, and that's kind of what you need for me from an attacker, from a player whose designated position is in the final third. You need him to deliver something. So as soon as Arteta dropped Willian, brought in Smith-Rowe, and dropped the back 5 and stuff, Arsenal turned around a little bit. So from a Liverpool perspective, I think this could be tough. I'm not really sure exactly what to expect, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I assume it's going to be a case of maybe just the usual where teams can sit in a little bit and then Arsenal try and, because they scored a really good goal, didn't they, last time on the counter-attack, playing out from the back and beating Liverpool's press. Maybe they try and adapt similar tactics in this one again. I don't know. It is a really tough game because not only have we had this international break, but I think it feels like Liverpool haven't played for ages. That Leipzig game feels a long time ago. I actually can't remember what Liverpool's last Premier League game was. What was it?
I'm not sure. It's left my head as well now that you've said
that.
It's completely gone.
This is Wolves.
Oh,
that was it. Yeah.
See, one thing though with this time that Liverpool have had without a game, obviously coming into that Wolves game, Klopp had stuck with the same team, I think, 2 games in a row, certainly the same centre-back pair in 2 games in a row. And if, after realising that, okay, I'm sticking with this now for the rest of the season, Fabinho stays in midfield, Phillips plays alongside Kabak, Liverpool have now had, 3 weeks to kind of work on that, 3 weeks to get that drilled into. So I feel like the Liverpool that we're going to see from now until the end of the season, I think is going to be a bit more consistent, specifically when it comes to the lineups every week at least. And I actually think it could be a bit of a turned corner whereby we see a bit of consistency from Liverpool. Obviously, Jota's back, Firmino's supposed to be back. So I'd like to see a bit of a rejuvenated Liverpool with a constant back line from now until the end of the season.
I did rumours as well. I won't say away from what, the training game that took place at 3-3 a couple of weeks ago, the in-house one. In rumours that there was that game was almost a trial for a few different kind of behaviours in and out of possession. I just wonder whether you alluding to it there, this is the first chance that Klopp and his staff have probably had a chance to actually coach the team, which sounds ludicrous, but think how many games Liverpool have been having over the season, just relentless, non-stop. You're doing the post-mortem from one, and then you're then prepping for the other. So there isn't that much coaching time. I do just wonder whether we're going to see a few little adaptations between now and the end of the season, which may produce more consistent, better results, especially with the team probably going to be more settled, unless they get a bout of ridiculous injuries again, which, you think given the season he've had, surely not.
No, I agree. I'll be looking for some of these little alterations when we face Arsenal, to be honest, because I expect Liverpool to have worked on something that they haven't had the time previously to work on during this 3-week period, so it'll be interesting to see if anything happens. In terms of predictions, Dave, for this one, what are you going with?
Yeah, I am going for a Liverpool win. I'd love to back Guy, who'll be hoping that maybe we'll give him something, but I just think you might see it. I think you're going to see a stronger Liverpool between now and the end of the season. So, yeah, I'll go with a 2-1. A tight game, but one that Liverpool come out on top.
Yeah, I'm also going to say 2-1. I think this will be a tough game, and I don't think Arsenal will roll over by any means. I expect Arsenal to be really competitive. My 2-1 stems from, I just think Liverpool will turn a corner from now until the end of the season. I think this 3-week break will have benefited everybody, and yeah, I think that's where my results coming from. Really, I think Liverpool will be ready for this one, and looking forward to what's next. In terms of Real Madrid, we haven't actually spoke, have we, about the Champions League draw, Dave? So
we have not.
What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I thought it was, despite the big name that Real Madrid are, I actually thought it was a fairly decent draw, all things considered, for Liverpool. I'm actually don't know if I've gone from that period to now thinking, are we underestimating Liverpool, Real Madrid a little bit here? Because it's kind of like, this is a good draw for Liverpool, and at the end of the day, it's still Real Madrid. They've got really good players, but rewind to the moment that the draw was made, I thought it was a fairly decent draw, all things considered.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. I was scared of getting certain teams, to be honest, because Liverpool's vulnerability to certain moments and certain qualities in particular has been problematic of late. I'm thinking specifically the way Timo Werner just exploited the high line so easily and stuff, and it was just so naive from a Liverpool perspective. I was just thinking, if we face a quick forward line here, we're going to get done. We're going to get shown up. And I was looking at Bayern's front line. They've got Sane, they've got Gnabry. I was looking at PSG. Obviously, they've got Mbappe, Neymar. Chelsea have got Werner, obviously, and Pulisic and Hudson-Odoi and players like that. City have got Sterling, I suppose. And even Dortmund had Haaland. And the heart of Liverpool's defence is the weakest part of the minute. So I think out of all the teams Liverpool could have faced, I don't think Real Madrid was a bad draw at all. And I think specifically avoiding City, PSG and Bayern until at least the final. Again, you can't really complain. In terms of Real Madrid, I do think they're kind of being underrated a little bit. They're obviously not a bad team as Real Madrid, and the team that won the treble or whatever a few years back in terms of consistent year on year. It's still largely that team, but they've just aged a bit, and they've obviously lost Cristiano. But it's still a crux of a gang of absolute top players.
Yeah. If you think they've got, I think they're a really good technical side, aren't they, Real Madrid? They've got loads of good technical midfielders, and they got the likes of Ramos, who's really strong defensively, even though I think he can be a little bit underrated sometimes. And then Benzema, who's just in elite form at the moment, considering he's 33. He's, I had a look this morning. He scored 17 their league goals this season. I think no other player scored more than 5. So it just shows, he's just on fire for them. He's also setting them up as well. And at 33, that's crazy. And I was thinking maybe that blackmail scandal he got involved in 5 years ago, that kind of lost him his place in the French national team, has maybe done him a favour. Because he's almost in he's always been a great player, but he's next level at the moment. Yeah,
I mean, looking at Real Madrid as a team, they do seem a little bit reliant on Benzema in attack, because I think some of the other players around them are just a bit less. They're a bit further away from the prime, I think. Looking at this season in terms of the scoring numbers, in terms of goals minus penalties per 90, top, unsurprisingly, is Lionel Messi. Second is, I think, a lad that you was asked a question about on last week's Q&A, Yusuf El Nesri.
Yeah, Sevilla.
And then third, Luis Suarez at Atletico Madrid. And then fourth is Benzema. Funny enough, fifth is Alexander Isaac. I'm not sure if you've flagged him recently.
Yeah, we talked about him, didn't we?
Yeah.
Said he was could be a potential option for Liverpool.
Yeah, but Benzema's obviously going to be a threat for Kabak and Phillips if they had the two players who were going to play. Obviously, Benzema's a seasoned performer. He's won the Champions League and stuff. Kabak is 21, still learning the game and stuff. And Phillips is just not supposed to be playing at this level, really. So that's going to be a bit of a problematic area. And I think specifically the likes of Modric and Kroos, although they're getting on a little bit, specifically in Modric's department, they're just difficult to pressurise, and they're difficult to. They're unflappable, I think is probably the best way of putting it. So in terms of Liverpool pressurising them and winning the ball and stuff, they've just got ways out, and that's going to be something Liverpool's press will have to manage carefully. But I wrote a piece shortly after the draw on Real Madrid's tendency to kind of play a horizontal game, and how that benefits Liverpool and the spacing behind Liverpool. Because I think Real Madrid is specifically kind of a controlling team. It's very side to side, lots of switches of play, and the overall game, the overall tempo of Real Madrid's game is just quite slow. Even without the ball, they're not like a very aggressive team without the ball. I'll get the numbers up in a sec. But they almost play in a way that isn't really associated with a specific identity. It's just kind of... Do you see what I mean? It's like a teams from a few years ago, maybe.
Yeah, well, it's not that. Although they mainly play like a 4-3-3, don't they? But it's not like a Liverpool 4-3-3. I think it ties in a little bit with what I was saying, that they've got really good technical players. So, they can play a lot of nice football. They can, and you said you're going to bring the numbers up, so I'll leave that door open for you. But they move the ball across the pitch very nicely. But there's not a lot of players who are kind of you're back to have that ferocious kind of run at you, cause a bit of mayhem. Now, I think Vinicius was meant to be that, wasn't he? But it hasn't quite happened for them. They got Eden Hazard, who just can't seem to settle in there and stay fit. So those kind of players that you'd expect to bring that to the team, it's not really there. Like they're still giving game time to the likes of Isco, who's again another really good technical player, a bit like a James Rodriguez type, where really got it on the ball, can play a wide range of really nice penetrating passes. But there's just no one there's not like, say, and no wonder they're always getting linked with him. There's not like, say, a Salah who can just pick the ball up and dribble at plays and just unsettle things and, shoot from miles out and, just make things happen. It doesn't feel like they've got that aggressive personality.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I think they're a little bit more old school in a way, if you see what I'm saying, I mean, lacking identity and stuff. Specifically without the ball, we are used to the top teams in the modern day being really intense and really aggressive. Obviously, this might stem from Real Madrid's aging core of players. But in terms of pressing in La Liga, only Sevilla have showcased fewer pressures than Real Madrid this season. And that's overall pressures. In the attacking third, so pressing high up the field, Real Madrid rank about 2019-18, about 13th in the league for pressing in the final third. For the middle third, they rank 19th. And for the defensive third, obviously the ball's not there very often, they rank about mid-table. So from a Liverpool perspective, Liverpool in the attacking third, I think, are top of the league, or maybe second. Same with Manchester City, I think. These teams who are really dominant, they usually press without the ball and they're usually really intense and stuff. And Real Madrid don't really fit that mould. They're just kind of... and in terms of switches of play, this was in the piece as well. But in terms of switches, so far this season, Real Madrid have played 676 switches. That is behind only Sevilla, and both of those teams are kind of out in front. For perspective, Barcelona are 19th for switches of play. And switches are generally good, and switches can cause problems for Liverpool. Liverpool are inclined to shuffle over to one side, so Real Madrid can get these switches right, it'll cause Liverpool problems. But I think what I'm trying to capture is the tempo differences of both of these teams, Liverpool and Madrid. It does favour Liverpool. If Liverpool can get this into a fast game, a really intense battle or whatever, in a typical Klopp mould, I think Real Madrid will be. They won't be used to it. It'll be kind of new to them, I think.
Yeah, I do think in general the league is a little bit slower as a league than the Premier League. So, you're kind of playing one of the best really in terms of a intense game of football in Liverpool. And yeah, this is why when the draw was made, I did think it's a good matchup really for Liverpool. And I've gone a little bit more the other way in that, it shouldn't really be underestimating Real Madrid too much because they are Real Madrid. And for me, looking at all the numbers beyond what you're just saying there, the table for once feels like a really good reflection of the team that they are so far this year. I think they're third at the moment, very close to Barcelona, 6 points behind Atletico. If you look at most underlying metrics in La Liga, that's kind of where they are, the top 2, top 3 team. So Liverpool are basically taking on the second or third best team in Spain at the moment. So on that basis, it's never going to be easy. It's always going to be a tough game, but just stylistically, there's reasons why Liverpool can be quite confident.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's the stylistic matchup of the game. It's a little bit of a shame though for me that Anfield isn't going to be full when Madrid come to Liverpool, because if there's one thing that can up the tempo of a game and really get the match to descend into chaos almost, it is the atmosphere at Anfield. And I think the second leg is at Anfield as well, I think I'm right in saying. So, if that was the case, I'd be pretty confident that Liverpool are going to progress. But with it taking place in empty grounds, I'm not sure whether Henderson's going to be fit in the midfield to really pressurise these players and help the match descend into something a bit mad. It's hard to predict a little bit, but I do think stylistically, in general, it looks favourable for Liverpool. Not favourable to the extent that Liverpool should wipe the floor with them, like we've said in the past with certain opponents, but just favourable in terms of what could have been the case, in terms of what Liverpool could have got.
Yeah.
The draw.
Yeah. When you get to the last 8, it's kind of, it's probably the best you could hope for, unless you got Porto. But even, Porto haven't been too bad actually this year. So, that's it. In the context of who you could have had, it's a really good draw, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think we'll do predictions on this one then, Dave. Stick with the first leg for now.
It's away the first leg, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm going to go 1-1.
Okay. Reasons?
I just think it may be a little bit more cagey. I expect Madrid to be a little bit stronger at home, even without fans. I just think Liverpool won't be desperate to get it done on the night. I think they'll know that they'll have a lot to offer at Anfield. They're my reasons, mate. I think Liverpool will be fairly content with that result.
Yeah, I really don't know how to predict this one. I must say I don't think Liverpool will lose the first leg. I really don't think Liverpool will lose. I feel like we could comfortably get a win, considering all the stylistic things I've just mentioned. But then with it being away, the quality Real Madrid have, specifically in the department that Liverpool are weak, in the centre forward and stuff, it just feels like a difficult one to predict. I think I'm also going to go 1-1, but I wouldn't be surprised if Liverpool snatched the 2-1, to be honest. It just depends if Liverpool can get the match tempo to speed up. If Liverpool can get Real Madrid playing Liverpool's game, Liverpool will win, obviously. But it just depends how much of a say the likes of Modric and Kroos can have on the speed of the game. But yeah, we will see. It'll be an interesting one. Looking forward to that. So we'll be back next week after the Real Madrid side to talk about what happened before, and I think Liverpool play second leg against Real Madrid the following week. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, it looks like. So Liverpool play on the 6th and the second leg is on the 14th. So yeah, next week we'll be back to preview whatever happened on the first leg, and we'll probably be looking ahead to the second leg as well. So hopefully Liverpool get a win, and hopefully things keep looking up. Dave, thanks for joining us, mate.
Thank you, mate. Cheers, everyone.
And we'll see you next week.